Yo, this is Chuck, and welcome to the How to Defeat Dudes video blog. So this video blog goes out to Bail We Can, who asked me an incredibly relevant question to pretty much anybody who's either in martial arts now or who is interested in getting into it. And that question is, how do you get over a fear of fighting? Absolutely excellent question, and I'm glad you asked. Now, normally speaking, whenever I answer a question like this, I like to answer in groups of 5, just because I like to go 5, and it's fun to go 5, and I got big hands, and I want to show them by going 5. If that's alright with all y'all. So anyway, let's take a look. Number 1, and this, by the way, pertains to not just a fear of fighting, but to pretty much any kind of fear that you may face in life. And that is, remember that fear is a choice. Now, believe me, I know that turning off your fear is a lot easier said than done, and I'm not trying in any way, shape, or form to say that if you're afraid of something, then you're a coward or anything like that. It's not like that. But the point that I'm making is that whatever it is that you're afraid of, whether that be a fear of fighting or anything else, that thing doesn't actually exist right now. And it may never. So as such, there's no real point in spending your time worrying about something that isn't there. Particularly when it comes to getting into a fight, because if you're studying a martial art right now, you're getting prepared for it. Or chances are, you already are prepared for it. So when it comes or when it happens, you're going to do a lot better than you think you will. You'll be fine. So my advice on that front is don't worry about what could happen and just worry about right now. If you haven't heard of it before, a great book on that topic is The Power of Now. The whole book is about learning how to live in the moment like this. And this actually leads us into our second point. Point number 2! And that is, especially if you've already been training in martial arts, remember that you're just going to figure it out. Now, in making this video, as it stands right now, I have no kids. However, everything that I've ever heard about it from other parents leads me to believe that getting into fights is a lot like that. Meaning that when the situation comes to you, you're probably not going to be perfectly prepared for it, and you're just going to have to figure it out. And at the time, you're not going to be scared because you're going to be too busy just handling the situation. For myself, one of the biggest fears that I've ever had has been getting a shoulder or a knee injury, because I'm a taekwondo master and I'm also a stunt guy, which means that I live off of my body. And I just couldn't imagine what would happen if I got an injury that would take that away from me. And then guess what? In 2013, tore the rotator cuff of my left shoulder, and then a few months later, blew out my left knee. And I can tell you guys with an honest and open heart that it really, really sucked. But at the same time, it wasn't the end of the world either. It means I had to spend a long time hobbling around. It means that I had to go to rehab, and it means that I had to spend a couple months figuring out other ways to make an income. But here I am now, a year later. My shoulder's 100% healed, and my knee's not quite there, but getting there. And as a function of the strength and confidence that I got from making this recovery, I'm starting to do even cooler stunts than I was doing before I got hurt. Like this fall. Couldn't do that before the knee injury. So anyways, my point is, when that time comes, you're not going to have time to be scared. You're going to be in the zone and you're going to handle it because you have to. And it's as simple as that, really. Worst come to worst, let's say you fail and you end up getting your ass kicked. All that means is it'll probably piss you off and just make you end up coming back even harder and stronger than before. When I was a little kid, I was a little guy, I was a really sensitive kid, and I got bullied a lot and beat up a lot and everything else. And even though I was a natural at Olympic Taekwondo, in the back of my heart, I always still really had a fear of getting into fights. Just because I just didn't have a particularly aggressive personality. For a lot of my childhood, I always had this nightmare that I was up against some guy at a bar and that no matter how many times I hit him or no matter how hard I hit him, I just couldn't take him down. And then at one point in my career, I was really broke and really desperate, and I ended up taking a kickboxing match. This was here in Tokyo, and at the time, I didn't really speak Japanese. The rules were biased. You know, I was fighting a Japanese fighter with an all-Japanese crowd. I was pretty much the only foreigner there, and nobody wanted to see me win this fight. If you know what I mean. On top of that, I had cut almost 20 pounds for the fight, so I was in really bad shape, and I had an injured left hand. Needless to say, I fought the best fight that I could. We went into sudden death, and then at the end of the sudden death, they gave it to him by decision. After that fight was over, I ran into the bathroom, I vomited my heart out, and then I sat there and cried. To make matters even worse, the agency that was supposed to pay me actually stiffed me on the money, which was like $1,000 that I really, really needed. And then on top of that, my black belt ended up disappearing after the fight. For me, that fight was rock bottom. But as a function of having been through it, having survived it, and then having rebuilt myself from it, afterwards, I feared nothing. And for the first time in my life, after I had that fight, I had that reoccurring nightmare about the dude at the bar, and I didn't just beat him, I destroyed him. In fact, I think I actually killed him and then beheaded him with a samurai sword or something. But that's just a little bit too graphic, so we're going to stop that conversation here. So anyway, my point of all this is simply to say that if a fight comes, you're just going to figure it out, man, so don't worry about it. And then even if you get your ass kicked, and even if you lose, at the end of the day, chances are it's not going to kill you, and you're going to come back stronger for it. Point 3! Remember that you're stronger than you think you are. One of the funny things about doing martial arts training is that you end up getting really, really strong without necessarily knowing it. Most people who train, and in particular most people who train for self-defense, oftentimes get this concept that other people are hitting harder than they are, when in actuality they're hitting pretty doggone hard themselves. This is one of the things that actually makes martial arts training a little bit dangerous, because people will still think that they're not that strong when they are really strong, and then they'll hit somebody full on, full force, and they'll really hurt them. And for the person hitting, they didn't think they were hitting that hard, but they'd never actually used this stuff on anybody before. That happened to one of my students just last month. He's a teenage kid, he got into a situation with an adult, and then he used the technique, and he actually ended up really hurting the guy. And thankfully, at the end of the day, the guy ended up making a 100% recovery and everything was okay. But this was a kid who'd gotten bullied and kind of beaten up himself. And over the course of his training, he just had no idea how strong he'd actually become. So if you're training in martial arts right now, chances are you can hit way harder than you think you can. The other thing to keep in mind too is that, believe it or not, pound for pound, human bones are stronger than concrete. And that people have been stabbed like 20 times or more and have still survived. Not too long ago, I read about a woman in India who was attacked by a leopard and she killed it. Of course, she was in bad shape and everything, and she had to go to the hospital afterwards. But she killed a leopard with no martial arts or any kind of training at all. All she had was the farm tools that she had on her. So my point is that you're stronger than you think you are. So as long as you're committed to the fight, and as long as you're committed to your survival, then you will get through it. And chances are you'll do a lot better than you think that you will. Point number 4. Remember that the other guy isn't invincible. Now, me personally, I love MMA. I think UFC's cool. But one of the things that I don't like about the trend that I'm seeing is that people are getting this idea that the average person that they're going to go up against in a fight is a UFC fighter or something like that. So that in order to fight this person, that they have to know everything that there is to know about fighting and about every kind of fighting range and all this other stuff. And that's just not true. Of course, the more you know, the better. And the more you study, the better prepared you're going to be for whatever happens to come along. But keep in mind that the average person that you're going to get into a fight with probably isn't any bigger or stronger than you are. Chances are they're just a regular dude who just loses his temper. And they're not necessarily martial arts trained, or they're not experts in any kind of fighting. Which means that if you're trained, you're already better off than they are. The last 2 dudes that I knew that got into street fights that I talked to weren't some super well-trained martial artists. They were just normal guys with a quick temper. Most fights don't look like this. Most fights actually look more like this.
Where are you going? I feel like you're scared.
Meaning that as soon as somebody gets hit, they've never experienced a punch before, so they just fall down. Now yes, it's a different story if you're working as a bouncer. Or if you're getting into a fight with a guy that's obviously had a whole lot of training, or that obviously has a whole lot of, street fighting experience and has a scar like this going down the side of his face or something. But even if you are well trained, you don't have any business getting into fights with dudes like that in the first place. I've been training and fighting people for 20 years, and I would never fight a dude like that. I talk my way out of it. And as for the other case, if you're afraid of fighting, then you shouldn't get a job as a bouncer. There's lots of other work out there. When you're in an actual martial arts gym and you're sparring with people, of course it's hard to hit them because they actually know what they're doing, and they know how to read your techniques, and they have footwork and everything else. The average dude on the street who just loses his temper isn't going to have all that stuff. And while they will have anger, that anger is also going to blind them and slow them down. Believe me, after you've been training for a long time and you see what an untrained punch actually looks like, it's really slow, it's really easy to see, and it's pretty easy to avoid. Case in point, if you haven't already seen it, watch the video about the guy who talks about winning fights with just head movements. Now granted, he's good at what he does, but if you watch the video, he's doing something that pretty much any well-trained boxer, any well-trained martial artist can do, which is simply that you see a punch coming and then you get out of the way. And now, let's take a look at the last and what I consider to be the most important thing you should do if you're afraid of fighting. Study a ring sport. The fact of the matter is, ain't nothing on earth gonna help you get over your fear of fighting like getting punched in the face and kicked in the stomach. And the great thing about doing that is when you do it in the context of a ring sport, you're doing it in a safe environment with friends and where you've got lots of protective gear so you're not gonna get hurt. Now the reason that I say ring sport in particular and not combat system and or some traditional martial arts is because you need to find a system that has active sparring, where there are people who are actively and aggressively trying to attack you. That is the only way to seriously simulate the timing, the speed, and the adrenaline of an actual fight. Now, I'm not trying in any way, shape, or form to hit on combat systems or some traditional martial arts, because I study all of them, I love all of them. And I think all of them have a lot of really, really good stuff in there that you can use and apply. Ring sports are not perfect either. But if you want to get over a fear of fighting, you gotta get hit. I still remember the first time I got kicked really hard in the face and the first time I got punched really hard in the face. And you know what? Neither time knocked me out, knocked my teeth out, or even took me off my feet. It just hurt. It's kind of like going to the dentist, meaning that it's less than pleasant, but whatever, it is what it is. So anyway, to sum up these 5 points once again. 1. Remember that fear is a choice. You shouldn't be afraid of something that does not exist and that may not ever actually exist. 2. Remember that when it comes, you're just going to figure it out, so you're not going to have time to be afraid. Point 3. Remember that you're stronger than you think you are. Your bones are tougher than you think they are. Your survival instinct is probably stronger than you think it is. And chances are you can hit way harder than you know. Point 4. Remember that the other guy isn't superhuman either. He's probably just like you are. And last but absolutely most certainly not least, point 5. Study a ring sport. So guys, that's it. These are the 5 best ways that I know to get over a fear of fighting. I hope that you find this video helpful and that it helps you along in your martial journeys. As always, any questions, just leave a comment, let me know. This is Chuck, see you next time. Youll!